Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
All right. Welcome to episode number 14. Today you'll hear from Leah Carey about how to ask for what you want and or need in bed. And Carissa is back as well. And if you've not already done so, you can subscribe or follow this podcast by clicking the links that should be labeled. All right. Welcome to the show, Leah and Carissa.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Why don't we start with Leah, since you are the one who also has a podcast, and I know you're a sex and intimacy coach, so I want to share more about those, and then we'll get started with the questions.
Sure. So, like you said, I'm a sex and intimacy coach. I work primarily with people who grew up as little girls. And I say it that way because gender is really complicated. And so, I work with people who were brought up as little girls, regardless of how they identify or what their gender experience is today. And the reason that I do that is because most of us as little girls were taught to be quiet, be pretty, take care of everyone else's needs first. Make sure that if there's something to be done, you take care of it. You know, we get all of these ideas about how our usefulness in society is to take care of people and to be attractive. That is a very different message than what little boys get. Their messaging is about take care of things, make sure that you're strong and brave and that you don't have to ask questions. You can just go do the thing. So if we're talking about a heterosexual couple in bed, you have one person who never learned how to ask for what she wants because that would be prioritizing herself instead of the other person. And we have one person who never learned to ask his partner what she wants because he's just supposed to know magically and do it. That's a complete disaster waiting to happen once you get into the bedroom. So I work with the people who got the messages that little girls get to overcome that old messaging, to learn how to ask for what we want, to learn that our primary reason for being in the world is not to be attractive to other people, but rather to take care of our needs, to make sure that we are asking for what we need, making sure that we're saying no to what we don't want, etc. So yeah, that's what sex and intimacy coaching is about, learning how to ask for what you need and exploring new territory, you know, whether it's, just before you started recording, you were talking about a previous episode where you talked about BDSM. You know, if people want to sort of stick their toes into the world of BDSM, I'm here to help with that so that you're doing it in a safe, really connected way with your partner where there's tons of communication. Or if you're thinking about becoming non-monogamous or you're wanting to explore your first queer relationship, all of those are things that I work with people on.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And then your podcast is similar. Say that.
Yes. My podcast is called Good Girls Talk About Sex. And, I interview everyday women about their sex lives. So it is not an expert podcast where anyone's there telling you how to have better sex. It's literally the conversations you would have with a girlfriend, you know, over a bottle of wine after the kids are in bed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that sounds really fun.
That's great.
Yeah. All right. So to the main question we had, and I do want to say first that there are, because I try not to generalize, so there are men that listen to this. So not all men don't ask women what they want, but I would say a majority probably. No. Yeah, it's funny to say that, you know, in case some men are thinking that they would feel that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that. I think it's incredibly important to not generalize. I work really hard to not generalize and to name it when I do, because, one of the things about sexuality is that we have this belief that everybody's supposed to do it the same way, that there is something called normal that we're all aspiring to, but everybody feels like they're the one that didn't get the memo about what normal is, or what it's supposed to look like or feel like, or maybe they do think they know what it is, but it doesn't feel right to them. And so then they think they're weird or deviant. There is no such thing as one normal sex life. Whatever is right for you is what's right for you. And, I talk to a lot of women who say, oh, it would have been so much easier if I had, if I'd been born a guy. No, it wouldn't. They got equally terrible messaging. It just pictures outwardly different for them. So this is not about one gender being good or bad or right or wrong. We're all fucked up.
Yeah. I always say most people are pretty clueless.
I'd agree that.
Yeah. Most people everyone's just clueless going around life, and they assume everyone else knows what they're doing, like you said. So, but,
exactly.
And Chris and I talked about this, like, as a topic to basically, how do you critique someone, or how do you ask for what you want or need? Like, is there a preferred, like, how do you kind of, broach that subject with people, or have people,
Sure. So this is one of the most common questions that I get. I want my partner to do something different in the bedroom, but I'm afraid of hurting their feelings. I'm afraid of emasculating them if they're a man. And that idea of emasculating men is in itself ludicrous. Men are allowed to have their feelings hurt, just like women are allowed to have our feelings hurt. There's nothing, they are capable of surviving it. The idea of emasculation suggests that somehow they are less capable of surviving hurt feelings than we are. That's ridiculous. But this idea of, I want to give my partner some pointers and I'm afraid that I might hurt their feelings if I do, is a really common one. And so there are a bunch of things that go into this. First of all, I can actually tell you, I was at an event, because I attend events, they're sex positive events where touch is involved. And I went to an event where the name of it is Adoring the Feminine. And so all of the people who were female identified were the receivers of touch. And all of the people who were either male identified or stepping into their masculine energy for the evening, were the givers of touch. And so during each round, I would get paired up with somebody, and we chose our partners, but I would pair up with somebody, and my job was to tell them exactly what I wanted, where to touch me, what kind of touch I wanted, how fast, how slow, what direction I wanted the touch to go in, all of that kind of thing, what my boundaries were. And at the end of the evening, we did a closing circle. The men had been touching various women for, at that point, 2+ hours. And the overwhelming feedback from them was, it is such a relief to get instructions.
Yeah.
It is such a relief to not have to be in the driver's seat all the time, to not have to worry if I'm doing it right, to just be told what you want, how you want it, and to be able to do it and know that I'm fulfilling your needs. So let's use that as a base assumption. There are a lot of men out there who would love to get directions who aren't getting them because we're afraid to give them.
Yes, I've definitely been in that seat.
What happens, though, is that those of us who are socialized female have been socialized to not ask clearly for what we want. So we'll sort of wheedle our way into it. We'll manipulate our way into it. We won't actually ask for it. We'll just sort of turn our body and hope that they understand what we're asking for. Or there are lots of ways that this kind of unclear asking happens. But another really prevalent thing is coming at it as a criticism rather than a request. I don't know why you never touch me like, or you used to touch me this way. Why don't you anymore? So that it sounds to them like they're being shamed or criticized or, whatever. None of us responds well to that.
Yeah.
And so then you come out of that interaction and you say, well, I asked for what I want and I still didn't get it. He just got upset. So what's the point in trying? The point in trying is that you need to ask in a way that your partner can receive the ask and hear it for what it is, not as a criticism.
Yeah. I can see that.
So, Leah, do you think it's do you think it's the way women verbally communicate in the words that they choose, in that their partner isn't hearing and receiving what they want? Or is it, because they're, I don't know, something else?
I think it's often because I think it's often the tone of voice that it happens in and the way that it's structured. It sounds very different to say, I want you to touch me like this and you never do, versus, babe, I would really love it. It would feel so good if you would touch me like this. Or, I feel really loved when you touch me like this. That's something that I've been with my partner for about 3.5 years, and I've had to quote unquote train him, which is another really gross thing that women say about men. But I have taught him how I like to be touched. And one of the things that was not necessarily obvious, it wasn't, I had to say it to him multiple times because it wasn't part of his sort of repertoire of things he knew to do. I love having my face touched and stroked. And so I would periodically say to him, babe, I just feel so loved when you stroke my face. And then when he did it, I would give him lots of positive reinforcement. I just loved the way you touched me last night. It just makes me feel so loved, so cherished, so that he starts matching up in his brain that when he does this thing, I'm going to have pleasure, satisfaction, fulfillment, whatever, and he's going to get that positive feedback. That's how we, quote unquote, train our partners to do what we want, is by asking them in ways that help them understand what feels good to us rather than criticizing them for doing things that don't feel right.
Yeah. And I could see where love languages would come into play with this too, which we talk about a lot. Because if someone's likes words of affirmation and you tell them over and over, then obviously that's their reward. But if they like touch and you get really turned on and touch them more, then, that's their positive reinforcement. So I can see where they would.
Yeah, I think that's true. And also I really want to encourage people to use their words. Again, those of us who were socialized female, we were really taught to not use our words. We were really taught to sort of learn how to subvert the system. If we wanted something that wasn't happening, to figure out how to use back channels and go under the surface and somehow figure out how to make something the other person's idea. That kind of, I'm calling it manipulative behavior because manipulation is doing something to get somebody else to change their behavior without them knowing. So I'm not using manipulation, that word, as a pejorative. It's just something that we learned to do because that was the avenue that was available to many of us.
Yeah. And women probably feel it doesn't hurt their feelings if they do it that way. So they try to suggest things or something like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So in today's age where many where people are engaging in sex and they're not a couple. They're, having sex for fun.
Yeah.
What is obviously using the "I feel so loved" is not really something you want to say in the middle of that. But how would you extrapolate that into, something more casual and then potentially it leading to something more long-term?
Absolutely.
And making that emotional connection, I guess, later, if that's what you want.
Mm-hmm. So I'm thrilled you asked this question. There is I can't remember the word. It's not rubric. It's a series of letters. An acronym. It is called STARS, that a woman who I know, Dr. Evelyn Dacker, developed this acronym, STARS, that is your basic pre-sex talk. So here's the deal. You can have as much casual sex as you want. I am definitely a proponent of casual sex, as long as you have some conversation in advance of going to bed with each other. If you don't feel comfortable having a conversation with someone, you should not be taking your clothes off with them. I feel like that's a pretty low bar. And so the acronym is STARS. S for what is your STI status. T, what are your turn-ons? And that would be, here's how I want to be touched. Here are the things that feel really good to me. That kind of thing. A is your avoids. That would be, here are the things I'm not interested in doing. Maybe not that I'm never, ever interested in doing, but we're having casual sex. These are things that I don't do during a first, for me, when I was, out dating, having casual sex, one of my quote unquote avoids or, a boundary was I don't have penetrative sex with someone the first time I play with you. We can have genital play, but I'm not going to have penis and vagina penetration the first time. And the reason that I do that is partially because I want to make sure that there's, just good chemistry with somebody before I take that step. But also I want to know that they can hear and respect a boundary before I let them penetrate me that way. It's a perfectly fine boundary to have. Another one that, this was a big one for me. I actually really enjoy giving blowjobs, but the idea of having semen anywhere near my head, in my mouth, on my face is an absolute no-go for me. And so for a long time, I just said no blowjobs. And I didn't even say it out loud. I just, this was one of my manipulation things. Yeah. If they brought it up, I would find a way to sort of get out of it rather than saying, I don't want to do that. And then I learned I could have a boundary, which was, I would love to give you a blowjob, but no semen in my mouth or on my face. I have never once had a man say, well, never mind then, when I made that boundary. So we've got STI status, turn-ons, avoids. R stands for relationship expectations. And this would be where you say, I'm really enjoying you and I'm not looking for anything long-term. So, I would like to have casual sex. I'd like to be friends with benefits. Whatever it is that you're looking for, you just be right up front with it so that you're not going in with expectations that are at odds with each other. People get hurt when one of them goes into sex thinking this person could be it. And the other person goes in thinking this is a one-night stand, but neither of them says it out loud. So there's no way to bridge that gap.
Well,
so that's relationship. Yeah.
I just have to say on that part, then there's potential though that you don't know, but I don't know, unless that seems naive on my part. And I'm like, well,
I think that most of us have some idea of what we want for that night. Is this someone who I can actually imagine wanting more than tonight with or not? it's fine to not know what your long-term goals are. And they certainly can change. Yeah. But to go into an interaction saying, here, I either think that this is really a one-night stand or a friends with benefits, or I may be looking for something longer term. I don't know yet, but is that something that, are we on the same page with that so that neither of us gets hurt?
Yeah.
And then with stars, the final S is for your safety protocols. So do you use condoms? What kinds of birth control do you use? What other kinds of safety things do you need? For instance, if this is casual sex, do you need to have your phone within, hands, an arm length? Or do you need to know how you're getting home? That kind of thing. What are the things that help you to feel really safe?
Your safe word.
Yes, absolutely. If you're going to play in that way, definitely your safe word. Yeah.
Maybe even if you're staying the night or not. Is that too?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. That's the conversation you should have before you have casual sex. It's also the conversation you should have before you have not casual sex. This is the conversation we should all be having with each other.
Yeah.
And if you want, if your listeners want to go find all of that information, it's at maketimeforthetalk.com.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. And I always put that kind of stuff in the description too. So yeah. Perfect. All right. What's another complaint or issue that people have brought up in your either coaching or in the podcast that's been interesting?
Yeah. So I want to go back again to this idea of asking for what you want. One of the things that I find really useful is to turn things into games. And this is particularly dear to my heart because I spent the first 4 decades of my life having really terrible sex. It was just not fun. And so my feeling is if I'm going to have sex now, it is goddamn well going to be fun. And so I turn everything into a game. And one of the best things that I know to do is to turn learning how to touch each other into a game, into an exploration. Most of us who have been in any sort of longer term relationship, even if it's in the past, if you have had a relationship where sex became sort of routine, you have some patterns. You have certain patterns of how you touch somebody, how you kiss somebody, which parts of their body you focus on, all of that. That may or may not jive with what your partner actually wants. But because most of us don't use our words, we don't know that about our partner, and they don't know that about us. So, for instance, on my website, I have a game called Sexual Scientist. This is something I came up with during my time of exploring. I had this guy who we had become play partners. We had gotten together several times, and we had always said that we were not going to have penetrative sex. I want people to know that that is possible, that you can have an intimate sexual experience with somebody that does not end in intercourse if that's what you desire. And so at some point I said to him, I have this feeling that there's more touch that I would really enjoy, but I don't know what it is yet. And so I would love if you would sort of go with me into something like a science experiment where we make a hypothesis about something I might enjoy. And then we try that out. You touch me in that way. And we find out if I like it. And if I do, maybe there are some tweaks to be made. Maybe try that half an inch to the left or go a little faster or, whatever. Tweak it until it feels really amazing. Or on the other hand, you know what? I thought that was going to be great, but it was actually terrible. Let's never do that again.
Yeah.
And that way we learn each other. And we don't get into a situation where our partner feels bad or invalidated for not having known these things because we're discovering them together. And so, one time I'm the one laying down, having them touch me, and another time they're laying down and I'm touching them. It is a one-way touch experience. And that's something that a lot of women are really starving for, is being able to just receive touch without having to also give touch at the same time. Because again, we've been taught that we have to take care of our partner. So it feels very strange at first to lay back and just receive without reciprocating. But we're starving for it because a lot of the time our reciprocation is done out of a feeling that we're supposed to. And so we're performing that reciprocation rather than really experiencing and being in the moment. So I receive one-way touch and then I give one-way touch. And that way we're both getting to go through that experience together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to say too,
That's really interesting.
I was just going to say real quick, women have to touch themselves and know too sometimes. Like, is that what you're, and I know
well,
we've learned
again,
to use vibrators and toys and stuff instead. So
that's a great thing for women to do if that is something they're comfortable with. There are some women who are not comfortable masturbating, and there are some women who don't enjoy masturbating. And so I try very hard to not tell people you need to do this. Like, you should masturbate to figure out your body. If that is something that you can do, great. I think it's wonderful. If it's something that you don't like doing, totally fine. If it's something that you're not comfortable doing, then there's a conversation to be had about how do we sort of like overcome some of these internal issues rather than just saying you should do this. And then the woman goes and does it and suddenly all of her trauma comes up and she doesn't have anywhere to process it.
Okay. What were you going to say, Carissa? Sorry, Leah. Okay.
I was going to ask something similar. So
Okay.
I think having a conversation, sometimes having that conversation ahead of time isn't always, sometimes things are happening and you have to have the conversation while things are happening. So it's a very good point for women to know, like, what, like, no means no right now, or no, don't do that, or, establishing some of those rules.
Yeah.
Like in the moment,
In the heat of the moment,
is sometimes difficult. But as you said, I think some women are very uncomfortable doing that. And then, like you said, past experiences / trauma come in, and then it's not enjoyable at all. And
Yes.
it's like, just get it over with, I'm out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, and this is something that I deal with a lot of clients, of like how when I'm in the middle of a sexual experience, whether it's with a longtime partner or someone new, and I get triggered, then what? And I would say that the answer is you stop. And that can be really, really scary. And so what I do with people is I actually practice with them saying the words, because one of the things we don't do, like, we can have an idea of what the words are, but if we don't have an actual sense memory of having said them out loud and the world didn't end, then it can feel like, oh, if I say these words, something terrible is going to happen. So I will actually practice with people, like, how do you want to say this? Do you want to say, I need us to take a break for a minute. I need to breathe. Or do you want to say, I'm a little overstimulated. I need whatever it is that feels like the way that's safe for you to say it. Let's practice you saying it so that when you get into the moment, you have an actual sense memory of having said it before, and it doesn't feel so totally overwhelmingly frightening.
Yeah, I could see that being helpful. And it is that time. I know time has flown by as always, but if you had any final comments, or Carissa, maybe you go first if you have a final question or issue that you wanted to bring up. And then if not, I can go to Leah and she can have her final comment first.
No, I found this very interesting. I like the acronym because it does cover all of those topics that are, it gives structure to the conversation that you can, ask and find out what those questions are because, every woman in a different stage of her life is in a different place. So I just think that I liked that. And then I liked the fact that you said make it fun for what was it? Make it fun for the talk.com or something like that, or make the talk fun.
Make time for the talk.com.
Oh, make time for the talk.com.
Yeah.
So I like that. And I think, I don't know. I can't phrase what I'm trying to say, but I appreciate everything that you said. And I'm going to have to check out your podcast too. So I appreciate
please do. It's a lot of fun.
Yep. Any final comments for you, Leah?
Well, thank you for having me on. I hope that people will come listen to the Good Girls Talk About Sex podcast. What I think is incredibly useful about it, I mean, to some extent, it's just fun, and sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes we talk about really difficult things, but getting to hear women talk about sex is just fun. But I think it serves a much deeper purpose, which is that most of us were taught that talking about sex was not something that was allowed. And that if we had sexual needs or sexual desires, that somehow made us, depending on your generation, unladylike or perverted, or, there are lots of different words that we might have gotten. And that leaves us all sort of feeling stuck in our own little bubble of not feeling, again, like we didn't get the memo, but there's no way to figure out what the memo was because nobody's talking about it. And so this is different, all sorts of different women, everyday women talking about what they like in bed, what they don't like, what their trauma was, how that affects them today. People of all ages, races, sexual proclivities, kinks, orientations, all over the gender spectrum, really everything. I try to cover as much as I can. So please come listen to Good Girls Talk About Sex. And you can also find me if you're interested in doing coaching with me at leahcarey.com.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, those great resources. And, it never fails that I lose my train of thought just as I'm about to ask a question. So I will leave it there. Oh, no, that's what I was going to say. Thank you. My podcast, like the whole reason I'm having my podcast as well is to normalize sex and to do away with the double standard. And it doesn't have to be taboo. There's no reason we can't talk about it. So thanks for having a different spin on it, but same basic concept. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Leah Carey, and also Carissa again, of course, for being on the episode. And hope everyone enjoyed it, and we'll put the resources on there as well. And thanks again. All right. And don't forget to subscribe or like. And if you loved it, leave a review. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Frank Talk, sex and dating educates.